What's going on, everyone? In this video, I'm going to talk about something that I realized the other day that I thought could be a great way to make your campaigns more evergreen. So basically, the strategy that I'm going to show you in this video is to start off with an Apollo search. Now, we have some search criteria in this Apollo account currently, and the key to making this as evergreen as possible is to think about what data is regularly changing. And in other words, if you were to do exactly the same Apollo search every single week, what search criteria would you have to put in that Apollo search that would result in different leads being found from exactly the same search criteria every week? So an obvious one is funding. So if you can set it to say that, you only want to find companies that have been funded in the last 30 days, for example, then of course new companies are getting funding every single day. And that's going to yield different results if you were to run this on a schedule. So another one is job posts. And so if you follow my channel, you know that I do a lot of lead generation for recruitment agencies and also for outsourcing companies. And so I'm always looking at ways to make that as evergreen as possible. And one thing that I love about using Apollo instead of just using Clay for this is that it not only lets you set filters for company size and industry and company location, but it also lets you set filters for the jobs at those companies that match that criteria. If you were to try and do this in Clay, you would have quite a hard time doing it. And the reason why is because you would have to start by setting up a list of companies that would be a static list. And then from there, you would have to find jobs at those companies. And of course, that doesn't allow room for new companies that post new jobs a week later. The only workaround that there is in Clay, which is very evergreen but has very little control over the companies that you find, is starting with a job search. Starting with a job search has some very powerful filters, but it doesn't let you filter for specific industries or specific company sizes. And so you have to put in a lot of filters and prompts and formulas in your Clay tables to basically filter out all the garbage that you don't want and be left with a relatively small percentage of jobs that are at companies that are relevant to you. So it doesn't work too well, but when you use Apollo, it can work very well. And the reason why is because if you look at the filters here on the left, we have here job titles of the decision makers. We have here the location of those decision makers, the company employee headcount range. Right now I'm putting a custom range of 5 to 200. I know that's a very big range, but I'm basically just massaging those numbers and playing around with them to try and get this list to somewhat of a decent size. You then have your company keywords, and you can also exclude company keywords to get more relevant results. And then down here at the bottom, you have job postings. You won't have this if you're on a free trial of Apollo. You need to pay. I think it's $49 a month in order to have this feature. And you can see that currently the only setting that we have here is not for any specific jobs. I mean, I did try that. It was just job located at United States. So this is kind of a soft signal. What this indicates to us is that these companies in this list have a budget to hire. Now, they might be hiring an accountant, they might be hiring a salesperson, they might be hiring an IT engineer. It doesn't really matter. The problem was that I'm setting up a search right now for a PPC agency, and what I started with was currently hiring for. In this section, I put a list of keywords related to marketing, PPC, paid ads, Google ads, Facebook ads, meta ads, and so on and so forth. And the problem was that the list size was too small. It was something like 700 people. And so by removing all of those keywords for the job post titles, we are just looking at jobs that are located in the US. It doesn't matter what the job is. It just shows us that this company is hiring. Now, they might be backfilling roles where people left, but many of them will be growing. And it also shows us that they have the money to hire people. They have the money to advertise a job post on LinkedIn. And so it is a soft signal, but the great thing that you can do with a search like this is you can see that it says currently there are 2,300 people in this search. Well, because of this search filter being job postings, it is going to change every single week. It's going to change slightly every single day, but it's going to change more extremely on a weekly basis and even more extremely on a monthly basis. I haven't tested it, but I could argue that potentially more than 50% of the leads in this list will no longer be present a month from now because they will have filled their open position and other companies will have posted jobs within the next month. That's going to result in other companies and other decision makers at those companies being found in this Apollo search. So the reason why I'm telling you all of this is because what we can now do with this is copy this link URL and we can use an actor. We can actually use Apify to scrape this. So here's an example of one. It's called Apollo Scraper, scrape up to 50,000 leads. And you can see it costs $1.20 per 1,000 leads scraped. So you can open this up and then you can create a task, and I'm just going to give it a name. That's my client's initials. Soft hiring signal, and I can say home services industries, and I can put today's date. So I put dates in this format because I'm weird, but that's all good. And it says, do you want to copy the input from the input tab? I'm going to say no. Okay, and now it's showing me that I have typed something too long, so let's try that. Okay. So I'm going to delete this URL that was here and I'm going to paste in my new one. And then we're going to look at the other criteria. So it says, what's the total number of records required? That is optional. I'm not going to set any number there because if I'm running this on a weekly schedule, it's going to be changing every single time it runs. Okay. So then what I'm going to do is file name /run label. That's optional as well. And just put something similar, soft hiring signals, 7th June 2025, and then clean input. Don't check this because what it's going to do is remove a load of the columns from your resulting table. We want to get as many columns and as much data as possible because a lot of it is very useful for when we enrich in Clay. And then run options. So we want the latest build. We don't want the timeout to be on because it could run infinitely, indefinitely. I just don't want to have errors and issues that I have to troubleshoot. And then what's the maximum number of charged results? Well, I'm going to leave this checked, toggled on to say no maximum limit because this week it is 2,300 people. Next week it could be 5,000 people or 1,000 people. We don't know, but we don't want to limit the results that we're pulling from Apify into Clay with a scheduled scrape. So this is set up. Everything looks good to me. This is a task that I'm creating. So I'm going to click Save and Start. And that's going to kick off. And then we can, I think it might be here. No, it's not here. We can go to Save Tasks and we can click into this one that's running currently. And now when we click on these three dots here, we can schedule it. And it insists on putting dashes between every single thing, which is a little bit silly, but anyway, there's our name of this schedule. It says schedule at the end of it. And I want to run this on a weekly basis. You can also run it custom if you want. I'm going to run it every Sunday. And you can set the exact time that you want it to start running at. So I'm going to say 4:45. So that's basically how it's going to work. So I'm going to create the schedule. That's basically taken care of in the Apify side of things now. So every single week it's going to scrape and it's going to find new data and new leads. And so the final part is what we need to do here in Clay. So what I have here is a template that I use. It's a workbook that I've built that is a standard workbook that I use for a lot of my PPC clients. And the way that this is built up is it starts off with an Apollo import, and then you can qualify those companies, and then you can pull. I'll explain this a little bit more in detail later in this video, but basically this starts with a CSV import. That's how I've basically done things with Apollo searches until now, until I had this idea of finding ways to find evergreen signals in Apollo that will allow us to run things on a schedule and find new leads every time it runs. So what we need to do is click on Add down at the bottom and search for Apify. And I'm going to choose Import Data from Apify Actor, select my own API key, and then I'm going to search for the scraper, which is the Apollo scraper. And now we can search for tasks. So I'm going to select the task, and it says, do you want to get data from a specific run? And you could get data from a specific run if you wanted to by toggling this on. But in our case, we don't want to do that because we want it to run the same task multiple times once a week. And each week when it runs will be a different run. So we do not want to get data from a specific run. And so we're going to click Submit. And then it brings up this modal on the right side of the screen where you can see it says Import Data from Apify Actor. I like to label all of my sources so that I know exactly what they are. And you can see that it's saying actor run / dataset not found. That's because in Apify it hasn't finished populating just yet, but that's okay. We can rerun that later on. And so we're going to import the data from the Apify actor. I'm going to give it a name and say soft hiring signals, 7th of June 2025. All right. So the name is there for the source. That means whenever I look at the sources in Clay, I will know every single source what's what if I have multiple sources. And so we're going to set this to run on a schedule. We're going to change it to run on a schedule from day to weekly. It doesn't give you as much granularity as Apify, so it doesn't let you say the day of the week or the time of the day or the time zone. It'd be really nice if they did that. Basically what we've done here is we've set up all the settings for this to be able to run. And so I'm going to close this for now, and after Apify has finished, I'll be able to rerun this and populate it. And so this is going to be the first table. It's going to be our source table where all of the data comes into this workbook. So I'm going to drag it over to the far left, and I'm going to give it a name and just say TAPPC hiring soft signals 7th of June 2025, because then I'll be able to know which table I'm looking at if I have to select it later on. Currently it's empty, there are no columns, and there will be columns and rows after it populates. But basically all you need to do from here, once you have this table populated, is you need to add an enrichment that's going to be write to other table. Write to other table, and I'm not seeing it here. Send table data, like they did a lot of changes recently, but anyway, it's going to be either send table data or write to other table. And what we need to do is map each column from this table into the next table. So the next table, I'll just walk you through how my PPC workflow goes. So basically what we have is the columns will be mapped from the first table to the second table. It's going to fill with first name, last name, full name, job title, contact LinkedIn, blah, 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 blah. And whenever you get data from any source, like Apollo, for example, you're going to find that some of the columns are missing data. So for example, the domain name might be missing or the company description might be missing. If the domain name is missing, then you don't have a hope in hell of finding the email address, because when you use email finders, you need a full name and you need the domain. So what we do here is you can see that this is my original import table, and it's basically just an empty table. It doesn't have any enrichment columns except for right to qualify companies table. And you can see that we're deduping on a dedupe column. So let's have a look at this. Our dedupe column is full name plus, okay, it's not showing what the prompt was, but basically it's full name plus company name. And I believe it's plus domain as well. But basically that's so that we can deduplicate the rows, and then we're going to write to the qualify companies table. And this is a great tip that I want to give you on how to save data or save OpenAI tokens when you're doing enrichments in Clay. So what we're doing here, we're writing all of these leads into the qualify companies table. And you can see in this table, what we have is we have a group of columns here called find domain and find company description. So this has a run condition, and it says if the domain column is empty, then run this Clagent step to find the domain of this company. So we make sure that every single company in our list has a domain, because later on we're going to need to use the domains to get people's email addresses. You can also see that we're deduping again on this column. We're deduping on the dedupe column. And what we want to have in this qualified companies table is just the companies. So imagine you did a search in Apollo and you have 5 people in this company and 3 people in that company and 10 people in the other company. You don't want to run the same process. Let's imagine that there's 10 people in the same company where the domain is missing. So what that means is you would run this Clagent step on 10 rows, and that's going to cost you a lot more data than if you just run it on 1 row. So we have 1 company per row in this table. So imagine that there were 10 people in 1 company. When we write from the second table into the third table, it's going to deduplicate. And if I can find my dedupe column, might help. So this one, organization name, domain merged, and account linked in. So we're basically using company data to deduplicate. So if 10 people from the same company were pushed into this table, were written into this table from the last one, then their person data would not affect this dedupe. So this dedupe will leave us just with the companies. There'll be 1 company which has 10 people in it. There'll be 1 next company, 1 next row that has 5 people in it. There'll be a next row that has 3 people in it, right? And so what we'll be able to do then is run our processes, run our enrichments, like find the company domain, find the company description, just once for each company. And that's going to save us a lot of OpenAI tokens. Okay, and then we have a check to make sure that they're not a competitor. It would be very embarrassing if you were to reach out to a company that's in the same industry as yourself or as your client offering your services. So you want to make sure you avoid that at all costs. And then if they're not a competitor, then what we do next is we look up multiple rows in another table. And what we're doing here is we're looking up the people from the previous table. And so it's going to pull in multiple rows, and you're going to see 5 records found, 3 records found, 10 records found, and so on. And from there, we can write all of those people at each company into the next table. So then what we're left with in our final table is all the people who are in each company. And we know that we have the domain for the company, we have the company description, and we also have confirmed that this company is not a competitor of you or of your client, right? And so from there, this is where all of the enrichment happens on the people. So we have some ranking steps. I have a video on YouTube that shows my process for ranking employees in the same company, so that you don't reach out to too many people in the same company. So this is the ranking steps. Just search for my video on my channel. You'll be able to see how that works. We have the email that comes from the source. In this case, it's Apollo. And we use BounceBand to verify that email address. If BounceBand verifies that the email address is deliverable, then we're good to go. But if it's not deliverable, then we have an email waterfall here that's going to normalize the first name. Then it's going to run it through Kit and then through debounce. And if debounce says it's not valid, we'll check with BounceBand that can validate catch-alls. And then we will, if that doesn't say deliverable, we'll run it through Lead Magic, then debounce, and then BounceBand to see if we can get a verified email address. And what we have at the end is a merged column of email merged valid. So that is our final verified email address that we know we can use. We're deduping on this column as well, because sometimes you will get duplicate people, especially if you have multiple sources running in one workbook. So we're deduping on this to just make sure that we avoid that. Then we normalize company name, we normalize the person's first name. So this is just so that we can use these custom variables in emails. And then we have some prompts that generate AI customized, personalized sentences, and basically add them to our campaign. So one thing I want to mention as well, just a final note, is that if you are using SmartLead like I do currently and Clay, then there's a problem that I found out about a few months ago, where basically if you try to just push custom variables from Clay into SmartLead and then have SmartLead be full of spintax to vary your wording of your emails, then it won't work. There's some kind of bug. SmartLead tells me that it's on Clay's side. Didn't bother asking Clay how to deal with it. So SmartLead support told me that what you need to do is download your list from Clay as a CSV file and then re-upload it into SmartLead. I think you have to delete all the leads from that campaign first and then re-upload them as a CSV file, and then that will fix it to allow SmartLead to apply or resolve the spintax and have variations of wording in every single email. So it's a bit of a pain in the ass. And so my workaround for the last few months, ever since I learned that, was to generate the entire email here in Clay. And so what you would see in SmartLead is just a merge field. So where you have an email and you have, first name, I'd like to, I want to, do you want to, spintax. Instead of that, I just have email one with two squiggly brackets either side of it. And that's because, like you can see here, this whole email is generated in Clay. So there's a prompt here that's just saying where you see spintax, apply it or resolve it. And there's an email that is being generated. So it works okay. It doesn't work brilliantly. I find that the prompt output gets cached in Clay, and so sometimes you get the same wording being used in every email. So what I've been doing in the last week is using formulas to resolve spintax sentences. You can't do a whole email at once. You have to do one email at a time and just say, if the final valid email contains an @ mark, then resolve this spintax below and make sure you add a period mark or a question mark at the end of the sentence, because it wasn't doing that. And so you'll have email 1 sentence 1, and then another formula column, you'll have email 1 sentence 2 and email 1 sentence 3, then email 2 sentence 1, email 2 sentence 2, and email 2 sentence 3. And then you can add those as custom variables to your add to campaign step. And then from there, you can add everything into your SmartLead account campaign, and all the spintax will have been resolved and it will be working very well. So that is the workaround. And actually the new method that I just explained to you of using formulas is better than this older method that I was using, because we're not using OpenAI tokens whenever we use formulas. So it's going to be a little bit more cost effective when you're running thousands of rows. So that is how you can use Apollo searches for evergreen campaign building that ultimately over the long run is going to save you time through scheduled scraping. And all you need to do is, like I said, set up your actor to run on a schedule in Apify, and then also in Clay, when you add the source, you just need to make sure that also runs on a schedule. And that way you're going to be able to fill your campaigns with leads on autopilot, set them and forget them, hopefully, and focus on building the rest of your business. So thanks a lot for watching this video. I hope it helped. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Talk to you soon. Bye.